And I am back. This is part 2 with Brooke Skylar Richardson of episode 1. If you have not checked out the first one, I will have it linked right down below in the description box for you. So make sure you check it out so that you can hear the first part of the story before jumping into this part.
So I'm going to rewind back to April 26th at her first doctor's appointment that she had with Dr. Andrew for birth control. Dr. Andrew had come in after her weight and vitals were taken, and, Ashley had kind of informed him of, like, the kind of state she was in, that she was very nervous and, that type of ordeal. She refused the pelvic exam and stuff like that, and then she just the only thing she wanted was birth control. What caught Dr. Andrew off guard was when he was looking at his notes from Ashley. When Ashley had asked Skylar when your last menstrual cycle was, Skylar replied a couple weeks ago. So when Dr. Andrews then turned around and asked Skylar again when her cycle was, she said, I think I had one last month. So that really alarmed him, and he was like, we're going to do a urine sample so we can do a pregnancy test. So they have Skylar do this urine sample, and Ashley actually does the dip-in pregnancy test, to which she sees that it confirms it, that she is in fact pregnant, and she takes the news to Dr. Andrews, who then has to turn around and tell Skylar that she is in fact pregnant. Skylar freaks out. She says, I can't have a baby. I can't tell anybody. She's hysterical. He calms her down. He tells her that teen pregnancy happens all the time. He tells her that it's really important that he gets the measurements and that he does an abdominal ultrasound. So he measures her stomach, which was a huge ordeal during this trial of how big this baby was. So him measuring with the ultrasound and with his measuring tape, which he couldn't remember if he used a measuring tape or if he just did it with his hands because he's so used to measuring, is what he said. He measured 32 weeks, and he told her within the next 10 weeks, you will deliver this baby. So I need you to come back in this week for another appointment so we can do a more full-on exam and make sure everything is okay. So Dr. Andrews says that he told her that she could no longer have the birth control because she obviously is pregnant. But Skylar says that he never mentioned it, which, at that point she might have just been very hysterical and didn't even hear him. Who knows? It's, again, he said, she said situation. Skylar never called, and Dr. Andrews actually had his receptionist reach out and try to call Skylar twice, and nothing ever happened. She never answered. She never wanted to come in for that appointment. And again, because of this HIPAA Privacy Act, they could not reach out to her parents or say anything to her parents. Skylar said that her mom told her that the birth control was ready that day. She went and picked it up and she started taking it. When she was asked about it, she stated, I didn't think it would hurt anything. Even though we have no proof if Dr. Andrews said that she couldn't take it, the proof, I think, is in the text that I just read you guys from her mom. And I'm going to quote that again. She said, please still have a good day, Mommy. I'm sorry if you are stressed now, but I wouldn't be getting any smaller if I was, and I wouldn't be on birth control. So this girl knew, she knew that if you're pregnant, you shouldn't be on birth control. With that being said, when asked if birth control would affect the baby during the trial, Dr. Andrews did mention that no, I don't think it would have any effect on the baby, which I do think is kind of weird because usually any type of prescription drugs has a risk even with just birth defects. So that's kind of strange. I mean, with my first son, I was put on a prescription for being nauseated all the time, and I took it maybe twice, and I just freaked out, and I was like, I don't think I could take this. I'm afraid it might do something. I kid you not, 3 years later when I was pregnant with my second son, I found out that that exact medication was recalled for birth defects. So glad I did not take that throughout my whole pregnancy. And I do want to state that I was 17 at the time when I made the decision not to take something that would potentially help me but could harm my child. I just want to throw that out there because I feel like a lot of people want to say that this whole thing is just about a little immature 17-year-old when there is a lot of people out there who were 17 and had a kid and took this whole situation a whole different route than this. I'm reading you guys facts, but when I talk about this kind of stuff, this is just my opinion. I don't want anybody coming at me. This is just what I think. After the appointment, like I said, she went on with her life and talked to her mom a lot about prom and weight loss. During an interview with Lieutenant Fain, she says she knew she was far along, but she didn't know the exact amount of weeks until Dr. Andrews told her 32 weeks. She confirmed that she was getting big and had a suspicion she was pregnant, and also that she felt the baby move a lot, but was too scared to tell anybody. Those cramps she felt at prom and during the ball game were in fact her body going into labor. Skylar wasn't aware that Ashley, Dr. Andrew, and Dr. Boyce all informed each other and contacted authorities. Ashley noted a 19-pound drop in weight in just those few months. A lot of Dr. Boyce's memory is a little hazy because she was in such shock. She remembers questioning her, "Did anyone know? Did anyone hear you have the baby?" And Brooke just says no. And, Brooke is crying, Skylar, is crying at this point. The conversation continues with Dr. Boyce saying, labor is extremely painful. And Skylar replies, yes, it is. Dr. Boyce was the first person that Skylar told, and she had her baby the morning of May 7th, 2017. She says around 3:30 a.m. This kind of touches a nerve with me a little bit, and I know it's just a coincidence that this happens, but my youngest son was actually born on May 7th, 2016. So when this baby was born, my baby was celebrating his first birthday. After confirming the date with the investigators, she asked, "Am I in trouble?" And you kind of see a lot of these questions throughout a lot of this interview. If you do go and watch it on YouTube or wherever, the blog I mentioned, I will have stuff like that linked at. But yeah, a lot of it is just kind of her thinking about her own self during this time. And she asked a lot, "Am I in trouble? Can I go home after this?" She says, "I'm sorry" a lot. It's difficult to watch, honestly. Her walkthrough of May 7th with prompting questions like when, what, and where, this is what they got out of her. And I mean, it took a while for them to get it out of her because they had to just keep asking the same questions over and over again. But she says that she had the baby, she was in the bathroom, she was seated on the toilet, and that's when she had the baby. She could feel that something needed to come out. She said, "I don't think it happened," referring to her water breaking. She said she pushed and it came out. It wasn't breathing or crying. When asked if it was head first, she just said, "I don't know, I just tried. I never meant to hurt her." She couldn't remember if the cord was still connected. She acted like she did not know what a placenta was, what a cord was. Again, if your children are old enough to do adult actions like that, if they're old enough to sit down and have not only a sex talk, but a talk about how babies are created and what all comes with that in birth, I feel like. And at this point, the mom knew with the second boyfriend, so I just feel like that conversation should have been had. Skylar's younger brother was only, I think, 2 years younger than her, so it's not like she was well aware of a pregnant body or a pregnant woman and what they go through. She did work with 6-week-old babies though, so she knew a little bit more about babies than what she leads on in a lot of these interviews. She quoted that a lot came out with the body, and yes, she called it the body, but she said she buried it all together. When asked if she was okay, she replies with, "Yeah, I just don't want anything to happen to me. I didn't mean to hurt her." Lieutenant Fain asked what happened next. She said, "I held her waiting for her to wake up, but I had to bury her. Will I get in trouble for that?" Skylar says she wrapped her baby in a towel. She dug a shallow grave in the tree line in the middle of the night and placed her baby in the grave after taking the towel off of her. Skylar claims she cleaned up the blood with towels that she threw away a few days later somewhere else and not even at her house. She said she had cramps throughout the day, which caused her not to sleep. Lieutenant Fain tells Skylar that the medical staff, Dr. Andrew, Dr. Boyce, and Ashley, were concerned that she was planning an abortion. Skylar denied the statement right off the bat and said, "I would never." She asked the doctor about getting an abortion though, and she does let them know this. They told her it was impossible due to how far along she was in her pregnancy, which leaves me with, why would you state, I would never, if in fact you asked your doctor for the abortion? So that was just a little strange to me. When asked if she had searched for ways to have an abortion on the internet, she stumbled over her words and ended up with, I can't honestly remember. I promise I didn't try to kill her. They kept prompting this because from that, just like myself, they thought, okay, this girl looked up some stuff. She finally says she looked up how to have an abortion without going to a doctor. She says she Googled it, but she never tried it. She quotes, I didn't try to kill my baby. Lieutenant Fain explains what a forensic search is on a phone and that they will in fact be doing one on her phone. At this point, she gets very anxious. She starts running her hands through her hair. Her overall body language is very nervous and just, like I said, ball of nerves. They pressed her on the searches and she finally says, I don't know. I don't know what I really plan to do. And then she confessed that she searched how to get rid of a baby. This girl cannot even keep her story straight, and these people are literally getting all this out of her. There's no lawyer present. It's a mess. Right after she says how to get rid of a baby, she then says, oh, that sounds really bad now, I'm sorry. Lieutenant Fain steps out of the room because at this point he is contacting the other police officers that are actually at the house, marking off the crime scene and getting ready to dig up any remains that they can, because this has been a few months. While he's gone, she looks at Katie and she says, please be honest, what is going to happen? I don't want to go to jail. Skylar is very frantic and she says, I don't want to go to jail. She says this a few times, and what's the worst that's going to happen? I didn't mean to kill my baby. To me, that just sounds like a confession. Again, this is just my opinion and what I think, but if the baby was in fact stillborn, I don't really feel like that's something that somebody would say. Skylar says, finally, it's like she's talking to herself. She says, everything will be okay. The worst part is over. Like, the worst part is not burying your child? She says, do you think they think I killed her? She is also concerned that she won't be able to go to college in the fall. She even asks, you're not sugarcoating it, are you? When Brooke is told her parents will be coming in to see her, she just keeps asking, and then I'll be able to go home, right? And Lieutenant Fain replies, well, that's what we're working on. And I kid you not, Skylar looks over at that Katie and just gives her like this death glare. And Katie just says something along the lines of, I wasn't sure of all the details, I just said, you just need to calm down. So her parents come in for about 30 minutes. They have a little bit of time to talk to her before she's asked to go back to her house, to the crime scene, to point out where she in fact buried her baby. Mr. Richardson says, you should have just told us. And Mrs. Richardson cuts in right there and says, I know, kids get pregnant every day. Pregnancy isn't the end of the world. And I'm just like, that's not what you text your daughter. That's not what you told your daughter. Mrs. Richardson then starts right off with the reputation card talking about how neighbors and friends and everybody knows about this already. Can say that Skylar, talking to the investigators about her baby, she said it some, but she mainly referred to her baby as she and her. With her parents, she just calls her baby it throughout the whole thing. The dad questions about the doctor's office and how they would be stupid enough to give somebody who's pregnant birth control pills. And Skylar just acts like, oh, I don't know, which I kind of think it was just a mess up. Like they had already called in the prescription and maybe forgot to cancel it out or thought they canceled it out. Probably thinking that this girl's pregnant. Obviously, she's not going to take this, but little did they know. The dad keeps questioning her, like, why were you in here for so long? And she said, oh, I just had to tell them everything. He's like, well, what is everything? She said, well, they were asking me, like, if I looked up how to have an abortion. He said, well, did you? To where she replies, no, I told them everything. Mr. Richardson asks a few times if everything she said is true, and you kind of get the feeling like he's not even believing his own daughter. Skylar finally says to her parents, will you always love me? And her dad replies, yes, we love you. And Brooke says, do you believe me? And her dad says, how are we supposed to? We don't know what's true. Mrs. Richardson, out of nowhere, like it's dead silent for a little bit, and Mrs. Richardson says, Skylar, you're not going home with us. Skylar, I'm telling you, it makes me sick. That cute little bag of, and it sounds like she says popcorn that you had. I don't know, it's weird. And then she says, you'll never finish. And Brooke at this point, Skylar, sorry, just interrupts and yells, Mom. And her dad says, honey, stop. And Skylar says, do you have any idea how I feel? And Mrs. Richardson says, do you have any idea how we feel? Skylar says, I had my dead baby by myself. And Mrs. Richardson says, you could have gotten us, Skylar. I would have helped you. I've always told you that. I've told you I would always be here for you. I have always told you that I love you. How do you think I feel about my baby? Skylar says, I'm sorry, Mommy. Mrs. Richardson says, I'm losing my child and I've done everything right. Oh my God. Hugest eye roll right there. Mr. Richardson cuts in and says, you both stop it. We don't know what's going to happen with this yet. If she told them the truth, I don't know what they could charge her with. I don't think they could put her in prison. It doesn't mean what you did wasn't wrong. It doesn't mean you won't be in trouble, but we don't know yet. Let's not go there. Mrs. Richardson says, I'm sure the word is out and there is a crime scene at our house. And Skylar says, just tell them it's a misunderstanding. Like, no, it's not a misunderstanding. Like, you buried your kid in your backyard. Mrs. Richardson starts sobbing about other life troubles, and a lot of the rest of the video is her, like, rummaging through her purse, which is so loud and irritating. I just want to know how parents that are living, like, Skylar was still living at home. Like, she literally was there her entire pregnancy, and I'm like, you did not know that your daughter was 32 weeks pregnant. I'll come back to that though. Skylar is taken to the crime scene. She shows the exact location, she said, where she placed the baby, and she had actually sat a flower pot on top of the grave. They said that the grave was so shallow, and this is a little hard to hear, but the grave was so shallow that no digging tools were needed. They literally took a brush and were able to brush away the dirt and collect the skeletal remains, and there was little to no tissue left whatsoever after 3 months of being out there. Of this, a full autopsy couldn't be performed. All that was able to be done was an examination of the bones. They actually, in fact, measured 38 to 40 weeks, so she was completely full term. So Dr. Andrews was off on the measurements, a pretty big amount. And I think that's why it was such a big thing at the doctor's office, because, I mean, that would have made her like, what, 35, 36 weeks at the doctor's office. So that brings me back to like her parents. And I know I started showing with my first kid at probably like 12 to 14 weeks. And that was with my first kid. And I was little. I was like around Brooke's size, Skylar's size then. But what I wanted to say is, even if that could get by, I kid you not, 35 weeks and 36 weeks, my stomach like doubled in size. Like, it was ginormous. So how they did not catch onto this, I have no idea. There is some photos of them from the prom and that type of ordeal that I will have over in my blog if you guys want to check it out. A pathologist, Dr. Susan Brown, she was roasted during this trial. She states that there was fractures on the skull. She said there was also a puncture wound. She's unable to identify if these happened before the baby was buried or after. I kind of feel like, I mean, babies' bones in general are so soft and fragile to begin with. And I feel like if what Skylar said, having her baby in the toilet, if it just plopped into the toilet, I feel like that could have caused some fractures to the head. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I kind of feel like that could have happened there. Or the flower pot she put on top of a very shallow grave, I feel like could have done that as well. Dr. Brown also stated there was thermal injury, which means some of the bones had been a little charred, like maybe Brooke had tried to burn the remains. So when that is discovered, that is when Skylar is brought back into the interrogation room for the second interview. And at this time, more people are going out to the house and trying to get the missing pieces of bones that they're still sadly missing from this baby. So this is the interview where Skylar is questioned about having skull fractures, and Skylar just says, I didn't think she was breathing. I may have squeezed her too hard. I didn't mean to kill her. So this just really clouds everybody's thoughts on like what even went down this night. She does tell them in this interview that she named her baby Annabelle, and Katie is no longer in the room. There's a woman named Brandy, and Brandy asks a lot of the questions. She says, what about fire? And Skylar says, what fire? And Brandy says that there's evidence of her being burned, and Skylar says, I didn't burn her. I swear on anything. I'm sure of that. This Brandy keeps like really digging and digging and keeps asking, presses her on it, and Skylar just keeps saying no, no. And she also says that the baby was still attached, that she wasn't sure if the baby was attached to a cord or not still. She's all over the place. Again, no lawyer is present. It's just a very messy interrogation room. After pressing her for a while, and at this point, Lieutenant Fain is also pressing her because they have what they say, in quote, proof of thermal injury to this baby's body. She finally says that she grabbed a small lighter, and after digging the shallow grave, she placed the baby in and tried to light the bottom portion to cremate the body. When asked if the body actually caught fire, her response was, I guess. And she replied with a lot of I guess and maybes throughout this whole interview. While watching this interview, you do get the feeling that they're putting a lot of words in her mouth, which is very devastating because it's like nobody's ever going to know what truly went down that night.
And I apologize for another break in this episode, but I am going to end this part here. But the third part will already be uploaded and ready for you to jump over and watch to wrap up my final thoughts on this case.